Almost every draft class has that one polarizing quarterback prospect that half the people love and half the people think is extremely overrated. And while you could make the argument that every prospect has questions and doubters, it seems like Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson is in the center of all of it. In this video, we'll break down why I think Anthony Richardson is special, and also why some people believe he's too risky to invest a high pick on. You'll hear the phrase boom or bust very often for a prospect, but rather than making that lazy analysis about him, I'll give an honest evaluation of him by the end of this video. In high school, Richardson played at Eastside High School in Gainesville, Florida. He was a 4-star recruit, and after putting up impressive numbers, he committed to the University of Florida to play football. UF, of course, was also in Gainesville, so Richardson was under 20 minutes away from where he played high school ball. The recruiting process was a little uneasy, but Richardson settled on Florida and spent 3 seasons at the Swamp. He barely played in 2020 as a true freshman, but as a redshirt freshman in 2021, he shared reps with Emory Jones, but never had over 20 pass attempts in a single game in the 2021 season. Once 2022 came around, Richardson was the full-time starter and the hype train began. His numbers alone are not what's going to make him a top 10 pick in the draft, but it's the other intangibles. But anyway, he threw for over 2,500 yards, 17 passing touchdowns, 9 interceptions, added 654 rushing yards, and 9 touchdowns on the ground. 2022 started off rough for Richardson as a passer. He had no passing touchdowns and 5 interceptions after his first 3 games. But in the remaining 9 games, we saw improvements. He finished his last 9 with 17 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 2,126 passing yards, a 96.8 NFL passer rating, 520 rushing yards, and 6 rushing touchdowns. But the bad part, a 54 completion percentage. We saw less turnovers, more points scored on offense, and he looked more confident in his decision making as the season went on. So why is Richardson getting so much hype if his numbers were mid and his completion percentage sucks, you may ask? Well, once again, it's the freakish physical tools that are going to draw the attention of every executive and scout out there. He absolutely destroyed it at the combine, breaking the all-time quarterback records for vertical leap and broad jump. He also ran a 4.43 40 time and had 10.5-inch hands. The guy was literally built in a lab. GMs will love his size and physicality. He's not a Bryce Young, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield type prospect where his height or weight is a concern. Instead, Richardson is listed at 6'4", 244 pounds, making him one of the few quarterbacks that are that big and elite runners. When you see those measurables and mobility, you think of guys like Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and even Daniel Jones. I know the Josh Allen comp is overused for every toolsy quarterback with size these days, but I really do think it's fair to say that Richardson has the most comparable profile to Allen since he was drafted back in 2018. You could make the case for Trey Lance, but I think Richardson is even a better runner than Lance was. And speaking of rushing ability, Richardson is pretty special in that department. This past season at Florida, he ran the ball 103 times for 654 yards and 9 touchdowns on the ground. And he's not just a straight line runner that happens to be fast. He has the same skill set as some running backs with the ball in his hands. He can juke defenders, break tackles, and has enough burst to break away from defenders. We also love talking about arm strength, and that might be my favorite Anthony Richardson trait aside from the athleticism. Having a big arm is not a necessity, but it helps a lot in certain situations, whether it's tight window throws versus zone, throwing a corner route to the opposite hash, or just being able to launch the ball 65-70 yards downfield when you need to. This is a recent quote from an anonymous NFL GM. Josh Allen had this great throw at the combine when he was coming out. It was like a 70-yard bomb, and it kind of made all of us sit up and take notice. The general manager told ESPN's Matt Miller, Richardson will do that too, and not those fake rollout throws with tons of momentum. He'll drop back and chuck it. Even at the combine, he was throwing 60-yard dimes downfield, and it looked effortless to him. Lots of teams will fall in love with that stuff. And when it comes to quarterbacks, I love that stuff too. His pocket awareness also impressed me when watching last season. He has that thing where it's kind of second nature, where you feel the pressure coming, that clock goes off in your head, and you make something out of nothing. There's been plays where he should have been dead to rights, but you'd see him plant his foot in the ground and run or hop around in the pocket, evading pass rushers and making a throw, or just having a big run. Every quarterback benefits from a good offensive line, but Richardson has the ability to make plays in spite of his offensive line, the same way we saw Justin Fields do it in Chicago this past year. But of course, every quarterback labeled as boom or bust has their concerns, and I'll list mine for Richardson right now. The first thing people will point out is the 53.8 completion percentage, which is very bad. He had a 28.2% uncatchable pass pass rate over his last 2 years, which was 7th worst in all of college football. You can't really make excuses for that, but at least there's an easy tell as to why it happens. The guy just has inconsistent footwork and relies on his arm sometimes way too much. But the good news is that I think you can coach that stuff out of him. There's times he'll even miss a check down that could have turned into a big play, and that's also frustrating. You'll see times where he'll drag his feet and miss a receiver high rather than stepping into the throw. It looks great because the ball comes out of his hands so smoothly with great velocity, but to reach the potential of a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, he'll need to do that more consistently. Landing spot is critical for a guy in Richardson's case because he needs time on the bench and would greatly benefit from a proven offensive coach. Based on reports, it seems like the Seattle Seahawks love Anthony Richardson, and the idea of retaining Geno Smith for a couple years, drafting Richardson to learn behind him is very intriguing. There's been the idea of the Bears trading out of the #1 pick, and what if one team out there believed in the hype so much that they traded up to the first overall pick for Richardson? It's something I could see the Colts doing, I'm not gonna lie. Even if I were a team like the Vikings, Giants, Titans, Saints, or whatever, where you know you have a quarterback you can win games with, but chances are you're not gonna win a Super Bowl with them, that's attractive too because Richardson would have no pressure to play right away. Basically, what I'm trying to say is unless you have one of the elite quarterbacks in this league, he's worth taking a shot on. And maybe he is boom or bust, but you know what? I don't think it's just black and white. I can absolutely see a scenario where Richardson's floor is what we saw from Justin Fields during this 2022 season, and hopefully for Richardson's sake, he ends up in a much more ideal situation than Fields, who the Bears have done no favors for in his first 2 years in the NFL. But Justin Fields, for how much crap he gets, he was electric last year, and the Bears offense had the most big plays of any NFL team last season. Richardson's probably never going to be a guy who completes 68% of his passes in a season, but the best offenses in the NFL thrive these days on explosive plays. The two teams that met in the Super Bowl, being the Eagles and Chiefs, were top 5 in explosive plays on offense this season. And the worst part of all, or maybe the best part if you're talking about Richardson, is that Justin Fields had the worst pass blocking offensive line this past year. If Richardson's floor is Justin Fields of 2022, he all of a sudden does not seem as risky. Whichever fan base ends up with AR, whether it's the Seahawks, the Lions, the Colts, or whoever, they're going to be ecstatic, and I really can't blame them. For me, I'd feel comfortable taking him anywhere. Even if a team trades up to #1 overall, I understand the thought process. Not every quarterback prospect is going to be perfect like a Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck, but remember this: guys like Joe Burrow, Pat Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, were all drafted within the last 6 years. So while elite quarterbacks don't grow on trees, recent history will tell us that you can probably find one in almost every draft. And in a talented quarterback class like this, it might be more than one. That's gonna do it for this video. Let me know in the comments where you would take Anthony Richardson. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to you guys next time.